when you consider that 1 million people are at risk of infection if the world does nothing, and you consider that that's essentially what Australia's done despite requests going as far back as September from Europe and the US for help, and even in October guarantees that Australian personnel would be evacuated if they were in danger. This response is not adequate. We should be seriously considering the requests, if they come, as they have come to the US and the UK, for logistical and military support. I mean, this is quite an operation to build hospitals and treat enormous numbers of people, and of course have to remove people who've died and separate them from everyone else. This is a massive logistical operation, and we should be prepared to provide that. And we should have been providing support quite some time ago, because if we can contain this, then that is the best chance of obviously not only stopping it spreading, but of any direct risk being posed more broadly off the continent. But as it is, we've sat on our hands for months now, and now taking a step towards what should have been done quite some time ago.
But the government by now has committed over $40 million. We're sending Australian personnel. Australia is not a large country. That's quite a big response, isn't it?
Well, the government has contracted a private operator now. There's already questions being asked about whether that private operator will provide enough people from Australia as opposed to sourcing them from other countries, and that's something that we need to monitor closely. There have been a number of requests for logistical and military support, not specifically of Australia but more broadly. We should be prepared to offer that as well and provide it if it's necessary. And Australia stands, there's a reason that the US and Europe have been asking Australia for assistance. We have much greater capacity compared to the size of our country to provide assistance in the form of logistical and medical support than we've been providing to date. We now need to monitor what the private company under the auspices of the Australian government is doing, and that's going to be a critical question to see what is now delivered. And on that front, the Greens health spokesperson Richard Di Natale has volunteered to go to West Africa to monitor what is happening and provide assistance where possible, because there is really grave concern amongst the community here that the Australian assistance won't actually translate into meaningful help on the ground.
You know, I talked about knee-jerk reactions a moment ago. We saw the last government had knee-jerk reactions to many things. We saw that with things like the insulation program. And, you know, knee-jerk reactions, they might feel good at the time, but they deliver terrible results. And as a government, we've got to focus on getting the right outcome, being thoughtful, methodical, and rational about how we respond to these things. It does take time to get these things right. When we have a military response to something, we have means of getting injured military people out. With a health response, we have to have means of getting health workers out. We now have that in place. We have an Australian company that will be funded to the tune of $20 million to support the effort in West Africa. It will have 250 or so people there with 100 beds. And, this is a well thought through response to a very, very difficult problem.
This was, of course, the primary concern of the government in sending people over, of what do you do once health workers are infected, and the concern was getting them access to timely treatment. But today we learnt that the EU guaranteed medical treatment as early as October 20. Why didn't we act then if that was the primary roadblock in sending people over?
Yeah, I've heard those reports. They've sort of appeared now from nowhere, which is kind of interesting. But what we know is we do now have a UK assurance that we will get our health workers out. We needed to be comfortable that whatever pathway out of these countries, or any support that health workers needed if they were infected, had to be effective. You know, our first priority has to be to protect our citizens. We weren't going to go for a knee-jerk reaction. The fact that the EU might have said something, and who knows exactly what it was at this point, but might have said something that gave us some idea that they might have given us some help, is a long way short of being absolutely comfortable that we have a way to support our health workers. Look, as I'll repeat it again, 523 health workers. Of the 10,000 people infected in West Africa, 523 of them are health workers. This is an incredibly dangerous thing to do. And so we need to provide these people enormous levels of support and help. That is a far higher, much more dangerous thing for someone to do than to go into a war. I mean, this is an extraordinary situation. So for us to act irresponsibly and to act before we were absolutely comfortable that we had a solution to a very difficult problem would have been totally irresponsible.